Today I'm going to show you how I made this 1:9 scale diorama depicting an altercation between action star Steven Seagal and stuntman Gene LaBelle. And if you stick around to the end, I'll show you how it can be yours. I started this diorama by sculpting Seagal's head in 1:1 scale using water-based clay. I used a cutout of his profile to set the proportions and widened him out, starting with his eye sockets and then his jawbone, slowly bringing out his features. There are many versions of this story, but the highlights are thus. While on a movie set, Seagal was boasting about how he couldn't be knocked unconscious due to his Aikido training. Upon hearing this, stuntman Gene LaBelle offered to put him to the test. There was a tussle between the two men, which ultimately ended with Seagal being choked out and subsequently evacuating his bowels. Now I've heard versions where Seagal pisses himself and versions where he froths at the mouth. There are versions where Gene LaBelle gets a slap in the penis. And I've heard versions that centre around LaBelle's desire to seek revenge on behalf of all the stuntmen that Seagal hit over the years, a practice called tagging that is frowned upon by the stunt community. The version I'll be doing is based on a source I deem to be reliable, but more on that later. Just tightening up his beautiful widow's peak and smoothing out his ears. Here I am sculpting his beautiful ponytail. I managed to make that elegant yet masculine. It's important to make sure that's right. Just smoothing him out now. And there he is. Steven. Gene LaBelle, the godfather of grappling, was a professional stuntman, martial artist and wrestler who was in over thousands of films and TV shows, and he wrote 12 books and was by all accounts one of the hardest bastards in the world right up until his death in August of this year, and I really enjoyed sculpting his face. Apologies for the delay in getting this video out. It's been difficult to do the voiceovers. We're having some work done in the house and the builders can be a bit loud.
Macaroni in a pot, got some wet ass.
Both men are in a pretty aggressive situation, so I had to sculpt quite angry looking faces on them. And thankfully there are thousands of pictures of Gene LaBelle looking like he wants to pull your head clean off your shoulders. Seagal, on the other hand, kinda does one very, very cool face. Here I am refining the secondary forms and taking away some of the tool marks left by the early sculpting. Gene has trained some well-known fighters over the years, including Chuck Norris, Roddy Piper, Elton John and Ronda Rousey. Gene was somewhat of a trendsetter, performing with a bright pink gi, and can be seen here in 1935 inventing the hoisting the sides of my swimwear up while staring away from the camera, a look recently adopted by bikini-clad women the world over. Here I scored some furrows into his brow, then used a watery brush to knock back the sharp edges. I continued using watery brushes to smooth out the model, take away the tool marks. I tried 2 brushes in an attempt to save time, but it just felt a bit odd, kind of like 2 men sharing a urinal. No offense to men's room piss perverts or 5-year-old boys playing swords, assuming 5-year-old boys still play swords. I know men's room piss perverts do, because I witnessed it in Epcot. I brought the 2 boys into Odyssey Studios where they were scanned by the redoubtable Mark Maher and the enigmatic Laura Hurtado Miedas. Laura is also responsible for cleaning up the scans in ZBrush. I tried ZBrush once, and I still wake up screaming. There's a 3D printed Jean Labelle. I'm just doing a bit of grinding before sticking it onto a little armature. And then I'm sculpting his body in oil-based clay. This is Chavant NSP medium. It's my preferred sculpting clay. And if you try and tell me monster clay is better, I'll find out where you live and I'll push local dog shit through your letterbox. I'm just refining some secondary forms there before sculpting a nice jacket on Jean Labelle. And cut some snazzy lapels. He'll be the envy of the film set. And I'm just using lighter fluid to smooth out some of the tool marks, as you would water on wet clay. Then I made him some cool shoes. These are kind of like espadrilles or something. I have no idea. Just sharpening up the back there. Although we may not see the back, I still want him to look like $1 million, even in his street clothes. But how do I know he was in his street clothes?
Gene was in his street clothes.
This is stuntman Stephen Lambert, who claims to have been there on the day. He's been in thousands of films and TV shows. Here he is in Total Recall. I couldn't afford to license the clip, so I typed Total Recall shootout into an AI generator, and I got these images. Stephen is also the author of the book, From the Streets of Brooklyn to the Halls of Hollywood, and in it he recounts his version of the incident. He was kind enough to go through it with me.
Here's I'll try to envision it in your mind. Me and another stunt guy named Lincoln Simon. We're sharing this motorhome to get dressed. Mm-hmm. I stick my head out and I see on far end Seagal. In front of him, right, back towards me is Labelle. You know, you can't miss him. Mm-hmm. You know, big red-headed dude. You know, you can't miss Labelle. And I tell Lincoln Simon, I said, hey, you know, Labelle's talking to Seagal. Let's go over there and see what they're talking about. Lincoln Simon is on the inside towards next to the motorhomes. And as we stroll up, I'm hearing Labelle say, let me show you how it's done. You know, he simply casually walked around and started putting him in a chokehold. It was just a conversation between two masters, two black belts, you know, until the tides changed and Seagal decided, you know, to be a smartass and just blam with his forearm here as hard as he could. You know, I've got hit in the crotch, so I know the pain.
Yeah.
And you know the power of Seagal, how good he is. Seagal's good. And like I say in the book, you know, he flew up 4 feet. And when he landed, he didn't hesitate. He just stepped to the side, put his hand, you know, around his chest, shoulder area, you know, and just, you know, pushed forward with his right leg and pulled back with his right hand. And he went flying in the air. He flew up so high and he landed on his back.
Lambert says that the two men helped each other up and that the altercation ended there and then. There was no poo, no pee, no frothing of the mouth. If you'd like a more detailed account, I recommend purchasing his book from the link in the description. It's a fascinating read. This all took place on the set of Out for Justice, a film in which Seagal plays a New York detective who wears a sleeveless cardigan and a beret. I didn't include the beret because it's likely Seagal would have taken it off between takes and handed it back to the costume department. I chose to whittle Seagal's shoes out of some pieces of Brendan board glued together. They start off looking a bit like Homer Simpson's shoes, but we get there in the end. I first heard about this story from my good friend Mickey Kelly, who incidentally does an incredible impression of Steven Seagal. But not as good as his impression of Danny Glover. In 2005, Seagal released an energy drink known as Steven Seagal's Lightning Bolt. It's since been discontinued, but I managed to track down a can of it in America. However, the seller will not ship it to Ireland, so I have started a GoFundMe campaign to fly over to the US and document me tasting the can of Asian Experience flavoured Seagal drink. If you'd like to support me, the details are in the description. Next, I made a 2-part silicone mould by laying Seagal's body down on a bed of clay. I created the parting line with various sculpting tools. I smooth it out with a brush that's a rubber tool there so as to not scratch the model. I didn't bother sculpting his hands because they're too fiddly. Then I got those little plastic pellets you use for shooting cheeky children. They act as registration points, and that syringe there is incorporated into the parting line to make filling the mold easier. And I filled it up with Platsil Gel 25. It's a good rubber. Popped out all the little BBs, put the wall back on and filled up the other side. Be sure to use a release agent, because silicone will stick to silicone like shit to a sleeveless cardigan. There's a concern of air bubbles at the end of his hands, so I bent a scalpel blade and cut a little channel out of one side of the mould to allow the air to up through and out. And I filled it up with urethane and stuck on some 3D printed hands. I then tarted up his wrists and subjected Labelle to the same process. Stuck on a digital fist. And then I painted them. In 2003, Seagal wrote an open letter to the leadership of Thailand, urging them to enact a law to prevent the torture of baby elephants. He has also been accused of sexual assault by no less than 10 women. Shades of grey. I used shades of brown to paint his hair and did some broken capillaries on his face as he is under some duress, given the fact that he's been thrown through the air by a judo master. I was curious to know if Seagal's wardrobe, a sleeveless cardigan and military beret, was typical of a New York detective in 1990, so I asked Mike Dowd, former NYPD officer and subject of the Netflix crime documentary The 7-9, and he said,
"No berets, no cut-off sleeves. There's no way the detective wore any attire like you've described."
Jean's jacket, however, is based on this photograph of him with Matt Damon. Matt is wearing prosthetic makeup to look like Chuck Norris, as he was set to play him in a 2007 TV biopic based on Chuck Norris's memoir Much Ado About Punching'. Unfortunately, the project was canned, either because of a cholera outbreak or the writer's strike, I forget which one. I very enjoyed painting Jean Labelle's hair. Here I licked it with a couple of highlights. I also used an incredibly matte varnish to knock back all the gloss from Steven Seagal's black clothing, as he is the maddest chap in the world. I stuck the lads together with some metal pins. And then I stuck on Jean Labelle's big right haymaker. To create Stephen Lambert, I wanted to 3D scan a real stuntman, so I paid this guy to come into the studio, and we got down to some scanning, but not before I dressed him in some era-appropriate attire. Asked that I hide his identity, as he didn't want to attract negative attention from Steven Seagal, who he described as a living legend. I told him he should stop being such a massive fanny. He said there was only one massive fanny in the room, and he was looking at it. I told him if I knew he was going to be such a massive fanny, I would have used a massive fanny scanner. He said he was surprised I had a massive fanny scanner because I wouldn't even know what a massive fanny looked like. And I said I've seen more massive fannies than he's seen hot dinners. And he said I'd be the last person he'd talk to if he needed advice on massive fannies. And I said that's rich coming from a man whose wife ran off to Bulgaria with all his money. And it was at this point that he grabbed me by the throat. I was sure wouldn't allow me to use the footage, but it turns out this guy will do anything for cash, presumably because his wife ran off to Bulgaria with all his money. I stayed true to my word and had Laura pixelate his face in ZBrush. I then painted all the little pixels with various different light flesh tones and dry brushed his cool 90s waistcoat. For the part of Lincoln Simon, I just downloaded a man, but you can see Lincoln has a cooler quiff and a bigger jaw. So I went to town with a Dremel. I then used some modelling clay to resculpt his head more Lincoln Simonish. And then I made what could only be described as a very shit mould. I filled it up with urethane and gave it a lick of Lincoln paint. Gave him an olive green jacket, white shirt, and dry brushed his cool grey slacks. Then offered them up to the diorama. To make the motorhome, I drew up the basic shapes in Adobe Illustrator and used the laser cutter to cut the parts out of 5mm acrylic. I then bonded the pieces with dichloromethane. Dichloromethane is a controlled substance and can be difficult for hobbyists to obtain. I find the best approach is to walk into your local chemical manufacturer wearing a well-tailored suit, slap your hand firmly on the receptionist's desk, and in a loud, confident voice exclaim, "I want some dichloromethane." For the trailer hitch, I ruined a perfectly good paintbrush, and then I just glued a lot of shit to it. Then I primed it and used some decorator's filler or husband paste to fill in any gaps. Painted it silver, and then weathered it using some washes. There's a bit of black in the handle. I modelled and printed that gas cylinder and gave it some cool paint effects. Stuck on a transfer and then weathered it using a bunch of keys. I learned that trick from Miggles. There's a little pipe regulator. Glued a hose onto it, and that's how the actor gets hot water gushing out of this vanity that I'm building here now, out of Brendan board. I took a Dremel and with a roundy burr I carved the basin and used some husband paste to fill in any gaps. And cut a plug hole where all your Hollywood dreams can wash away. Here's a snazzy chrome handle. I also carved this little tap, or a faucet, as an American might say. At the time of recording this, Premier Trump has announced a bid for the White House 2024. And I could not be happier. This season of America has been very dull, and I would love another one of your shit show elections. I'm pretty sure your current president is operating solely by means of Weekend at Bernie's. I cut up a filthy piece of wood I found in the garden and stuck it down using my hands. Then I used my hands to stick the greasy wallpaper on the wall, and I peel that bit back with my hands. I'm doing most of this stuff with my hands actually, so I'll stop saying that. See, there's more handwork. It's all hands. I cut up some reflecting plastic to use as a mirror, and I I carved this small little folding desk with some metal trim around it, upon which your actor can, learn their lines, do cocaine, or the first AD. I made these little steps that lead up to the entrance of the trailer. They're cut out of bits of styrene and glued with super glue, painted silver, and then have some dirty paint effect. I fitted some mesh on it so the actors wouldn't slip and hurt their beautiful Hollywood faces. Then giving it a lick of paint. I based this motorhome on a picture I found on actor William Sanderson's Instagram page. Thanks, William, for letting me use the picture. This picture was taken in 1990, the same year Seagal and LaBelle had it out. I cut up a cotton bud and some styrene, painted it silver, and used that as a little hinge. But I forgot door handles. And then I dirtied it up with some washes, stuck on a few laser cut vents to let out all the Hollywood fart. And there's a few spots of rust, because everything in the 90s was just dreadful. For the roof, I cut some styrene, clamped it against a piece of wood and folded it over. Then I used a heat gun to bend it, snapped it in half, and that curvy bit is now the end of the motorhome. I hope that made sense. I stuck in a light so we could illuminate the glory that is the inside of this honey wagon. Ooh. I dirtied up the roof with some details and some mists of filth, and then scratched some of it off to make it look incredible. A couple of tail lights. And some more dirt. A few extendo legs to stop it from rocking when people are knocking. And some wheels I repurposed from James Mee's police cruiser. And I stuck on this door with magnets. I also made a base out of MDF and some layers of different coloured acrylic one. And a couple of tire marks courtesy of the Paw Patrol. The base folds in half for reasons that will become apparent later. And there it is. Hollywood. Let's pop the lads back in and give it a few final details. Now let's see what it looks like under an early morning Californian sun.
You are my sweetest downfall. I loved you first, I loved you first. Beneath the stars came falling on our heads. But they're just all light, they're just all light. Your hair was long when we first met. Samson came to my bed, told me that my hair was red. He told me I was beautiful and came into my bed. I cut his hair myself one night, a pair of dull scissors in the yellow light. He told me that I'd done alright, and he kissed me till the morning light, and he kissed me till the morning light. You are my sweetest downfall. I loved you first.
Steven Seagal and Jean LaBelle, both masters in their respective crafts, forever locked in a battle between truth and fiction. And try as he might, no one man will ever have enough strength to bend the truth back into shape once it's been forever twisted into legend. These two men, part of a brotherhood that stretches back through time to those who sucked marrow from a femur and saw it for the first time as a sword. We are men. We are beautiful and flawed. We are fathers, brothers, heroes, rapists, titans, and clowns. We have sired gods, vandalized the atom, and danced in the oceans of the moon. But even the greatest of men is only one headlock away from shitting his pants. I've buried the diorama in this location and hidden the GPS coordinates throughout the video. If you find it first and dig it up, then it's yours. Congratulations to Nathan and Killian Nichol, who found Mel Gibson up a mountain in County Kerry. And if you'd like to see my videos early, why not become a patron, like this shower of dorks? Shout out to Billy Bragg and Sapper Butcher. Love you, boys. See you next time on Bobby Fingers.
You can have a puddle of pee and you can have a poo there and then throw it away and say it never happened.